We shall make a start now. So if I could request everyone to kindly take your seats, inshallah. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. We begin in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most kind. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and send our peace and blessings upon the final messenger, Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. I greet you with the greeting of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Firstly, I would like to begin by welcoming everyone to the 30th anniversary remembrance of the Srebrenica Genocide here at the East London Mosque and London Muslim Centre. It is an honor to welcome you as we come together in remembrance, reflection and resolve. We mark 3 decades since more than 8,000 Bosniak Muslim men and boys were systematically murdered in what was the worst atrocity on European soil since the Second World War. Recognized as genocide by international courts, Srebrenica is not only a Bosnian tragedy, it is a human tragedy. It is a reminder of the deadly consequences of hatred, Islamophobia, and the silence in the face of injustice. We gather today not only to honor the memory of the victims, but to stand in solidarity with the survivors whose pains endures. And we do so with a clear message. Never again must be more than words. It must be a commitment we live by, a principle we uphold, and a duty we pass on to future generations. One of the greatest tragedy is that the world has not learned from the past. We continue to witness injustices and oppression. Unfortunately, we witness today what many experts have categorized as genocide in Gaza. We continue to witness the killing of thousands of innocent lives, including women and children. Today, on the 30th anniversary of Srebrenica Genocide, we call for an end to genocide, war and oppression, and we call for peace and justice. Tonight, you will hear from our esteemed guests and speakers who will help us reflect deeply on the lessons of Srebrenica. May this remembrance strengthen our collective resolve to confront hatred wherever it exists and to build a world rooted in justice, dignity, and peace for all. We have a number of very esteemed speakers with us today who will be sharing their reflections. And to start us off, we have with us Dr. Wajid Akhtar, who is the Secretary General of Muslim Council of Britain, and he will be speaking and sharing his reflection on Srebrenica, solidarity, memory, and healing. So without any further delay, Dr. Wajid. Would you prefer this?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah rabbil alameen wa salatu wa salam ala ashrafil anbiya wa mursalin nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam wa ilayhi tasliman jami'an kathira. My brothers and sisters, we come here today not only to remember the more than 8,000 Bosnian Muslim men and boys who were murdered in Srebrenica 30 years ago, but to confront a truth, a reality that is actually very painful but needs to be said. This is something I realized when I went myself for the first time just about a month ago. The genocide is not over. The genocide in Srebrenica is not over. We think it is over, but it is not over for those mothers who still are looking for their sons, even to this day, in multiple different pits because no one has told them where they buried them. It is not over for those widows who lost every single member of their family and have no one and nothing left and now living on their own in the middle of nowhere. It is not over for those children of rape, and it is not over for an entire nation that was traumatized, and it is not over for me and my generation who grew up watching this genocide and watching the whole world do absolutely nothing while it was taking place. And now my children have to wake up every single day and live through another genocide. Every single Muslim generation that is growing up in this world seems to have to get up and grow up with genocide as part of their childhood. It is not over. Srebrenica is not over. And Gaza is still continuing. This is what I want to tell you, because we cannot move on until there is justice. And just pausing the conflict is not an end. That's what happens all the time. That's what the powers do. They pause the conflict. They give the genociders part of your land. They tell you you have a two-state solution. They tell you that you need to make peace. They tell you you need to sit at the negotiating table. They tell you to shake hands with the people who's dripping with blood. Always we must forget. Always we must move on. Always we must forgive. But you know what? You can't. You cannot forgive or forget from a position of weakness. The Prophet ﷺ forgave the Quraysh after he conquered Mecca. You cannot forget or forgive from a position of weakness. This is the message that I want to give the Muslims. The lesson from Srebrenica is that genocide is not over and another one is continuing right now. As Muslims, we must stand up for justice. And justice doesn't just mean an end and move on. It means rectifying the horrors that have taken place. It means changing the narrative. It means deconstructing the industrial complex that has made the genocide possible. You think the genocide just happens by the person pulling the trigger? It's the media that justifies it. It's the people, the politicians who shield it. It's the entire infrastructure that made it happen. Genocide doesn't happen out of nowhere. Genocide is a team sport. And until and unless we realize that, and until we work as a team, everyone who is against genocide, whoever it's taking place against, unless we work together, unless we unite, we will fall victim to genocide in every generation. Every generation will wake up having to deal with another genocide, and we will just hear these hollow words, never again. Never again means to bring justice. Justice for the people who were slaughtered en masse in Srebrenica, but justice to the people in Gaza, justice to the Rohingya in Myanmar and beyond. This is something that all of humanity must stand up for. We don't just need words, we need action. Jazakallah khairan.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wajid, for this very passionate presentation. The message is that we as a community are a community of peace and justice. And wherever we see injustice taking place, it is a duty and responsibility of the Muslims to speak out. And the genocide in Bosnia hasn't ended. The people are still suffering. The widows, the orphans are still grown up, searching for their loved ones. And the exhibition that is on display is a visual testimony of that, very powerful images that testify to the horrific impact and tragedy that injustice and genocide can leave for decades. And today we mark the third decade, 30 years on, and the suffering still continues. So thank you very much, Dr. Wajid, for that. We now have a recording from a very special guest, and that is the Grand Mufti of Bosnia Herzegovina, Sheikh Hussein Kavazovic, and he has recorded a very special message for the audience today on Srebrenica genocide, from tragedy to rebuilding. So I would request our team to play the recording of the Grand Mufti of Bosnia Herzegovina.
Poštovani prijatelji, braćo i sestre, okupljeni Poštovani prijatelji, braćo i sestre, okupljeni u džamiji, istočni London, u prijateljskom Ujedinjenom kraljevstvu. Hvala vam na vašoj odlučnosti da čuvate istinu o genocidu u Srebrenici. Vi ste utjeha majkama i preživjelim žrtvama. Vi ste glas onih kojima su dželati oduzeli glas u bosanskim brdima oko Srebrenice u julu 1995. godine. I dok se prisjećamo žrtava, mi se moramo prisjetiti i njihovih dželata i njihove odgovornosti. Moramo se prisjećati i pogrešnih politika koje su dovele do genocida. Genocid je najbolji pokazatelj kuda vodi mržnja, isključivost i dehumanizacija drugog. Zahvalni smo vlastima i narodu Ujedinjenog kraljevstva na njihovoj podršci Bosni i Hercegovini i preživjelim žrtvama genocida. Zahvalan sam i na svemu što vaša džamija i vaš londonski muslimanski centar radi kako bi se sačuvala istina o genocidu u Srebrenici. Posebno sam zahvalan mom prijatelju šejhu Abdullahu Faliku i fundaciji Kordoba na njihovom trudu i podršci žrtvama genocida. Draga braćo, zahvalni smo vlastima Ujedinjenog kraljevstva na prošlogodišnjoj podršci rezoluciji Generalne skupštine Ujedinjenih naroda kojom se ustanovljava Međunarodni dan refleksije i komemoracije genocida u Srebrenici 1995. godine. Na nama je sada da učinimo sve kako ova rezolucija ne bi bila samo još jedna neispunjena rezolucija UN-a kojom bi ponovo iznevjerila se Srebrenica. Na kraju vas selamim i pozdravljam moleći uzvišenog riječima iz potočarske dove. Bože svemogući, ujedini naša srca u vjeri i ljubavi, učvrsti korake naše u istini i pravdi, osnaži volju našu u bratstvu i slozi, udruži misli naše u domu i domovini. Molimo te, Bože, da tuga bude nada, da osveta bude pravda, da majčina suza bude molitva, da se više nikada i nikome ne ponovi Srebrenica.
That was the Grand Mufti of Bosnia Herzegovina, Sheikh Hussein Kavazovic. I'm not sure if I pronounced that name correctly. Imam will correct me during his presentation so that we all know the Bosnian pronunciation of the name. But the message was very clear and very powerful. I think this recording was from the Grand Mufti of Bosnia, who is leading the Muslim community there, and you can see the resolve and strength in his voice, in his words. It's not a community of revenge, but his prayer is that revenge, in place of revenge, we seek justice. And this is the key message that is coming out from the presentations so far. We now move on to another presentation, and that is from Katherine Bomberger, and she is the international director of the International Commission on Missing Persons, and she will be joining us via Zoom, and we're very grateful for her time and sparing us this time during her busy schedule. I know she is traveling, but still really gracefully agreed to join us. So over to you, Katherine, on the voice of the missing, helping find closure.
Thank you very much, Abdullah. I just want to make sure that you can hear me. Can you all hear me? I just see that if you could give me a thumbs up.
Yeah, we can hear you very clearly.
Super, okay. Because I'm actually calling you from Srebrenica. We just arrived here now, and we're here for the rest of the week, and we'll be here for the commemoration activities that will take place on July 11th, on the 30th anniversary. And of course, I just heard Mr. Kabazovic, who's the Grand Mufti, who's played an integral role, a huge role in the work that we've been doing, and I'll explain later how he played that role. But let me take you back in time a little bit to when I arrived to Bosnia Herzegovina in 1998. I was not then the Director General of ICMP, but we began our work after the International Commission on Missing Persons was created in 1996 at a G7 summit to deal with the huge number of missing persons that went missing as a consequence of the conflicts that raged through the former Yugoslavia. About 40,000 people went missing. The highest number was in Bosnia Herzegovina, 30,000, and of course within that number is the Srebrenica Genocide, where over 8,000 Muslim men and boys were killed in a matter of days in a premeditated murder that took place around July 11th. When I came, we were dealing with the consequences of this horrific act. And our work was dedicated to ensuring the state of Bosnia and Herzegovina could take responsibility for finding all persons, regardless of their ethnic, religious, or national background. And what we attempted to do was to help Bosnia build the institutional and legislative architecture to take on this process. I just had a meeting this morning with the members of the Missing Persons Institute, which has representatives from all nationalities, all religions within Bosnia and Herzegovina, And I'm happy to say this is their 20th anniversary, and they continue to work together on this principle of impartiality, of working to find missing persons. When it came specifically to Bosnia Herzegovina, though, going back in time again, this was not the case. When I came, there was no Missing Persons Institute. That wasn't created until 2005, as I said earlier. At that point, the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia was focused largely on conducting investigations into what happened in Srebrenica. And at that point, NATO was providing security at these sites to make sure that bodies weren't being removed. But in fact, that had already happened, because after the war ended, the perpetrators went back to the original mass grave sites and removed what the executions had taken place, removed the bodies from the original mass grave sites because there was satellite imagery to prove the existence of these sites, and they wanted to hide evidence of their crimes. So they went back to these original crime scenes with heavy machinery, bulldozers, and remove the bodies from their original crime scene sites to secondary and third sites across eastern Bosnia. So not only did they execute over 8,000 Muslim men and boys in a matter of days, but they attempted to conceal this crime by moving the bodies to various different locations. When I started our work, the process of locating missing persons had not really begun. ICTY was largely focused on looking at cause and manner of death. So they were looking at ligatures, bullet wounds, etc. But no provisions were made to identify those who were missing. And in fact, most of the women of Srebrenica at that point still believed that their missing husbands and sons were alive and somewhere held in Serbian prisons. And of course, that turned out not to be the case. But it was a very difficult process to begin to even have that discussion with them and to tell them the absolute horror of what had happened, because the horror was not yet known. So as we continued to work, ICTY finished its process of investigations and then moved to trial by 2001. And the process was largely left to Bosnia Herzegovina to continue these investigations, and left to Bosnia to conduct identification. So when ICTY started excavating these bodies, they put them into body bags, sent them to the closest canton across from Republika Srpska. I don't know how many of you know the country or have been here, but it's divided into two entities. The Republika Srpska is one entity where Srebrenica currently is and where the massacres took place. So to safeguard the bodies that were found, they were sent to Tuzla canton. The hospital in Tuzla, when I got there in 1998, was overflowing with unidentified bodies. I mean, it was impossible for them to identify them. So we had a radical idea. I'm happy to report that that idea worked. We made a decision to try something new. This required working with the mothers of Srebrenica and other families of the missing to use advanced DNA technologies to try to identify the victims. The families agreed, and by 2000, we undertook a massive effort to collect genetic reference samples voluntarily from all of the families who went missing. Not only did this begin to expedite the process of identifications, which had not been possible before, and only at a very low level, but it began to reveal the secondary crime of the cover-up of the first crime. And I can tell you today, we've identified over 90% of the over 8,000 victims of the genocide, you really must come to Podachari to see this, because the burial is a testament to the cruelty and inhumanity that we commit against each other. But it shows every single case. I mean, it's a huge graveyard, and every single tombstone, under every single tombstone, is a person who has been identified using cutting-edge scientific technology, providing irrefutable evidence of identity. And not only does it provide irrefutable evidence of identity, but using advanced data systems, we were able to link the identity back to the crime scene in every single case. And what emerged from this, the truth about what emerged from this, is that you would find a disarticulated body part in one area. So on average, one man from Srebrenica would be found in at least 5 different locations, often 50 kilometers apart from each other. And there's no way we would have ever been able to confirm this genocide without the use of advanced science, but also to confirm the horror of the secondary crime, meaning that these bodies were found disarticulated in several different locations. So we took on the painful process of having, in a Frankenstein-like way, to reassociate these body parts using DNA. And this is where Imam Kovacevic came in at that time before he became Grand Mufti, because he had to help the family spiritually make a decision about when they were going to bury the body. Imagine a mother waiting for her son, imagining that he's going to come back. I mean, the last time, she would have seen him or her husband was, the way he looked before he left, before he was murdered. So that's in their imagination what they thought they would receive. But that's not, of course, what happened. So they sought spiritual guidance from, at that point, Imam Kovacevic to help them decide when to bury. So he issued a fatwa saying that at 70% they could bury the bodies. But this then meant you would have to find a minimum of 70% of the bodies. And again, this was very hard, and I'm sorry if this is upsetting to people, but I think it's important to talk about this and about what really happened and the horror that the families of the missing had to face. So in some cases, you couldn't, it was not possible to find 70%, or years later, 2 or 3 years later, you would find another piece of a body and then another. So a very good friend of mine, Aida Cherkes Robinson, who was a reporter at that time for Associated Press, wrote a very good piece regarding how many times do I have to rebury my son. So it was a very complicated process, but also scientifically it was complicated, but emotionally it was extremely difficult for the families, and of course spiritually. And Imam Kovacevic is now a good friend, or now the Grand Mufti, because of the help that he provided. So in the end today, over 90% of those who went missing as a consequence of the genocide have been identified. And what's very important about this is not only the truth about what happened and closure, if that's even possible for a woman who lost 50 members of their families, because I think in many cases it was not possible and each individual is different. But we then provided that evidence in over 35 criminal trials, including at the International Criminal Tribunal in The Hague, and also domestic courts in Bosnia Herzegovina. And that evidence ended up with convictions on charges of genocide for Karadzic and Mladic, and I now live in The Hague, where they are imprisoned. And that was an amazing moment, I think, for all of us to ensure justice for families of the victims. But this took a long, long time for them. As you can see, the process moved slowly when these cases go to court. I think this is something that we have to talk about, but it's very important that these cases did go to court, because this irrefutable evidence that I'm talking about continues to be denied by many people who still think the earth is flat or Trump won the elections or whatever. But this evidence continues to be denied by many people that this happened. So it's very important, the work that Abdullah is carrying out, the work that you're doing, the work that we're doing, and hopefully in partnership, because we've worked together with Abdullah on many occasions to make sure that the truth about what happened is known, and the scientific evidence that was used to prove a genocide is widely known. While I'm here, tomorrow we will be opening an exhibition here called Geography of Genocide, which my colleagues have worked on, where families of the missing will be able to see where their bodies were found, meaning, and all the different body parts that were found if they choose to. Again, this is very painful for them, but also it will be available to the public. We will upload a link to this on our website very soon. You really should look at it. I wanted to show you a picture of what an average man from Srebrenica looked like, because to see where the body parts were found, to demonstrate it. But sadly, I couldn't get into this meeting on my computer, and I'm using my phone, but maybe I can send it to Abdullah and he can share the picture with you. So I really I'm honored to be here. I want to thank you for this opportunity to discuss what happened in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and the many heroes, including the women of Srebrenica and many of you that had played an important role in ensuring that the truth comes out and ensuring justice, not only for the victims, but for all of us. And talking about Gaza, we are trying to get funding to put together a strategic white paper on what can be done in Gaza. The numbers are already very high, as you all know. I mean, the number of deaths, this is the atrocities linked to this, have been also referred to as a genocide, and I have no doubt as the ICJ conducts a ruling on this. But it's very important that we start now a process of thinking about how justice can also be served in that particular case. And we, as ICNP, have learned a lot. We're applying those lessons learned to Syria right now, where we're working with the new National Commission on Missing Persons that have been set up. As Abdullah knows, we've had a long history of working in Iraq. We're also working in Ukraine and many other areas. So I'm happy to have this connection with you, and thank you again for all your support.
Great. Yeah, I think a round of applause for Katherine will be most welcome. Thank you, Katherine, for joining us during your travels and whilst you're in Srebrenica, and providing this very detailed account of what the impact of the genocide has been and the ongoing work to solve a massive challenge and tragedy for the people who have lost their loved ones. Can you imagine 30 years on and there are still people who are missing, their body parts have not been found? And the work that the International Commission on Missing People, led by Katherine, is undertaking is something that is absolutely vital and something that we kind of congratulate you and your team and praise the effort that you're doing for the international community who want to see justice. I think it's very, very heartbreaking for those who have had an opportunity to visit Srebrenica and see the memorial. It's a very moving experience. Just to hear that we have to seek fatwa because on doing janazah, because all of the body parts cannot be found. 70% is found and then the burial is taking place. The body parts are spread across 5-6 different locations, each one 50 miles apart in some occasion. Can you imagine the effort that was made in order to hide the injustice, the genocide, and the action that was being conducted at that time? And Katherine and her team are working to unveil that injustice and the atrocity that took place 30 years ago. So thank you very much, Katherine. I'm not sure if you will be able to stay with us till the end of the program for another half an hour, maybe 20 minutes to half an hour. If you are still able to, then there may be some questions that you will be able to take from the audience as well. But if you do need to leave, please just let us know.
I do need to go soon, but I regret that. But if it's possible to take questions now,
Yeah, I think it will be a shame that if we miss the opportunity, because
and I'm sorry
there might
about
be
this,
some
Abdullah.
questions from the audience that are directed for you, Katherine. So I'd just like to open up any questions. Anyone have any burning questions for Katherine that you would like to ask? Yes, can I just ask you to pass the mic, please?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, the question is, I wanted to ask how much was your work impacted by the cuts in USAID?
Well, not our program in Bosnia Herzegovina. Currently, most of the funding, because we're now, and Abdullah probably, I don't know if you've been following the news, but we're now a treaty-based international organization, which happened in 2015. And the UK is a member state, which is good. So, lobbying them on these things could be helpful. They were giving us funding, the UK in this case, that stopped. I think, a lot of the funding is now going towards defense. So the primary donor for our work in Bosnia Herzegovina and the region is really the EU. Regarding USAID, we have another program in Vietnam where we're doing the same thing. Following atrocities committed over 50 years ago, probably before many of you were born, Agent Orange, high numbers of Vietnamese missing. So that was affected, but we ended up getting the money back, and then with State Department for Ukraine. But we don't have any US funding currently for the Western Balkans or Bosnia Herzegovina. So that was not affected, but thank you for the question. It's a good one.
Thank you. Yep.
Thank you, Katherine. You mentioned a strategic white paper for what you can do in Gaza. Can you expand on that? Do you have any buy-in from any states, and what are you proposing to do for Gaza?
Yeah. So what we want to start with is just a strategic paper on what can be done. So we're seeking funds right now from either Norway or Ireland, and we're just waiting for funding. We put together a concept paper, but what we would like to do, and this follows many discussions I've had with Navi Pillay, who's head of the Commission of Inquiry on Palestine, as well as with doctors in Gaza and also the Minister of Justice in the West Bank. We want to put together a white paper on how the process currently works, let's say before October 8th, how the process of investigating missing persons cases worked. That's number one. Number two, we would then want to do a comparative analysis based on what happened, let's say, here in Bosnia Herzegovina or other places we're working. And then the third part would be to make recommendations for the future. But I think there are many things that we can do now. And in speaking to one of the doctors in Gaza, I think there are things we can do now, but the situation is so politicized. I mean, as you know, I don't need to tell you everything that you don't know. It might be difficult to do things, but one idea would be to start taking genetic reference samples now. For example, from families of the missing. There are 20,000 orphan children, for example. It would be good to find a way to take genetic samples from them, to store them, and to have those available. The second thing would be to be able to take postmortem samples from a large number of bodies that are unidentified. Because we know that many of the bodies that have been, unidentified are put in areas near the hospital or something. Their missiles still, that would cause them to maybe blow up again. So, there are many things happening. So we want to be able to preserve evidence and to preserve the chance for families of the missing to find their missing loved ones, and especially those children that are now orphaned. So these are some ideas that we could work on, but we would need to first put together this white paper and get this out there, and it needs to be out in the public. That this is going on, but there are solutions that require proper investigations, and that's another thing. Just so you all know, states are responsible for finding missing persons and investigating their disappearance. So what happened in Bosnia Herzegovina is unique. It's unprecedented that the state took on this responsibility. And that is a really good thing, including the fact that the chair today of the Missing Persons Institute is a Bosnian Serb himself, not a nationalist, though. He is somebody that is working together as a team. So in the case of Gaza, however, the responsible state is Israel. So, this is going to be the key, is finding a way, as you all know very well, to deal with the politics that surround issues of atrocity, but also are linked to missing persons cases. But the first step is, let's at least finish this white paper and put something out there that puts everyone on notice that we now are looking at numbers and we're looking at solutions to a process to deal with the atrocities that are ongoing.
Great, thank you very much, Katherine. You're most welcome to stay as long as possible, and whenever you need to leave, we're most grateful for your time.
Yeah, sorry, I have meetings here now in Srebrenica, so I do apologize.
No, not at all. Please don't apologize.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, and happy to catch up later.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Katherine.
Thank you very much. All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Great, thank you very much. We'll now move on to our next speaker, Imam Merd, who's the former Imam of Birmingham Bosnian community and currently resides in Paris. And he will be reflecting on understanding genocide. So Imam Merd, over to you.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. First, I would like to thank my friend Abdullah for inviting me for this event. This is not my first time being here, and I'm always happy to come in this beautiful center and to talk about, on the other hand, these tragic events. Also, I thank you all for attending and showing interest for genocide in Bosnia. How do we understand? How do we understand genocide? We firstly need to look back into history. Perhaps not many people know that this wasn't the first genocide in Bosnian history. This was actually, according to historians, this was 10th genocide. And perhaps someone is wondering how something like that was possible, because especially in after Second World War, seemingly everyone lived in peace and harmony, meaning Muslims with the Christians and Orthodox and Catholics. However, this flame of hatred was actually emphasized even in some writings, but also this flame of hatred was cherished, shall we say, in the families, non-Muslim families. So very often what they would do, for example, there's a wedding or some other important event, they would deliberately leave one empty space on a table, or two perhaps, and they would serve everything, and then they would say to the family members, they would say, you see, your grandfather or uncle or someone else, some other close member or family would have been here had not Turk or Bosnian Muslim killed him. Very often they refer, because Bosnia was for a long time under Ottoman Empire, so very often they would refer to Bosnian Muslims as Turks. What was the real truth about that? Before that, I would like also, just before I forget, I would like to emphasize a few important facts. When we talk about a number of killed people in Bosnia, very often there's this figure of more than 8,000 Bosnian men. Unfortunately, this figure is much higher, and the genocide did not take only place, unfortunately, in town Srebrenica. The genocide took place in the whole Bosnia. So, for example, for instance, in capital Sarajevo, actually more people were killed than in Srebrenica, but in Sarajevo, people were killed during a period of 3 years. So it was the so-called slow motion genocide. Obviously, there was a difference with Srebrenica, because many people were captured, and considering it was a short period of time, or 1 day or 2 days, so it was very tragic indeed. And as we can see, as we could hear, that even bone fragments were dispersed in perhaps 5 or 6 different locations. So you can just, on a human level, you can just imagine how families, how they feel when they would wait for a few years just to hear that another bone fragment was discovered of their close member of family. Of course, for normal people, normal people can't comprehend this level of pathological hatred against Bosnian Muslims, because Bosnian Muslims, and I'm not saying because I belong to, I'm Bosnian myself originally. I'm saying this from the fact point of view. Don't forget that Bosnian genocide was the best documented, or shall we say, one of the best documented genocides in human history. So nothing was, there is no place for ambiguity or something that is left unclear. So I want to mention to you a few important facts that I'm very proud as a Muslim, and this is definitely not only case with Bosnian Muslims. This is definitely the case with all Muslims around the world. Bosnian Muslims never seek revenge. During even in the most difficult times, when Sarajevo was besieged, a Bosnian government repaired actually Orthodox Church, because within the center of Sarajevo there is a Orthodox Church as well, and which was damaged by the bomb shellings from Serbs again, who belong to Orthodox. But Bosnian government did not want to leave this church or churches in a state of ruin. So you see, just perhaps someone can't understand how that is possible. So this is definitely proof that Bosnians or Muslims have the highest level of tolerance. So the Bosnian Muslims never they have never sought for revenge. So perhaps if you look again through history, you will see that Sepharad Jews, they're called Sepharad Jews, who were expelled from Spain by Inquisition, they were welcomed in Bosnia, and they had the same status as every other citizen. On the other hand, when we talk about war in Bosnia, as I mentioned earlier, it is always important to know this, that in the same time, while Bosnian Muslims and government guarded and protected churches, all mosques on Serbian territory or Serbian or occupied part of Bosnia by Serbs and Croats, they were destroyed. Also, Bosnian Muslims never set up a single concentration camp. On the other hand, there are numerous concentration camps that were established in occupied parts of Bosnia by Serbs and Croats. So, and this has been documented. This is not that happened 1,000 years ago. So there are still witnesses alive. There are video footages. There's everything. So it's very clear. So whoever wants to present Bosnian Muslims as a violent, or sorry, as a Muslims in general, as a violent group or dangerous group, let them go to Bosnia and see who Muslims really are. And that's something that should be a very important message, that even nowadays, Bosnian Muslims. Someone asked me, are we prepared to forgive, or perhaps to forget? The problem is that no one is asking for forgiveness. If in order to forgive someone, you need to wait someone to ask for forgiveness and to admit that it's wrong, but they did. Unfortunately, nowadays, in Bosnia, there is still very high nationalist rhetoric where war criminals are being praised in the media, among ordinary people. They are being praised as heroes, unfortunately, not as war criminals. So even though I like to say that Bosnia is very, very safe country to visit. I'm very happy that many of you have visited Bosnia, and I hope that you had a good time there. But on the other hand, political situation is still very complex, and we don't have, unfortunately, we don't have a guarantee that something similar won't happen in future. So it's important to stay alert, because the price, because just being tolerant and nice is not going to save anyone from the genocide. So we need to establish some, shall we say, sort of mechanisms to defend ourselves, because the price that has been paid was too high, way too high. And finally, I would like to say that I hope that will never happen again. But again, we should never think always from our perspective. We should learn from history. And one, as we know, perhaps the most famous saying in relation to history is that history repeats itself. So that's that's unfortunately the case in Bosnia, as I mentioned at the beginning, that it was this was 10th genocide, and let's hope it will never happen again, because terrible injustice happened to innocent people, and they still believe in good. They never sought revenge, and they are still prepared, and they are more than welcome, and they are more than happy to live with their neighbors. And therefore, when you go and visit Sarajevo, you will see that in its close proximity there is a synagogue, Orthodox church, Catholic church, and mosque, and we regard this as a beauty. On the other hand, in other parts of Bosnia under Serb control, all mosques were destroyed. Again, I thank you for your time, and probably later on I will welcome you with your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Imam Merd, for those insight into the genocide in Bosnia. And it's worrying to hear that there is no guarantee that it's not going to repeat. And indeed, one of the lessons of history is that people don't learn from history, and we see history repeat itself. But we pray that that's not the case, and there is a political solution and resolve to ensure that such atrocities are not repeated. We'll now move on to our next speaker, and that is Shabna Begum, the CEO of Runnymede Trust. And she'll be talking about the linkages between Islamophobia and genocide. And many of you know that a very important report was published, I think it was last year or earlier this year, on Islamophobia. So who better to listen to this topic than Shabna Begum herself. So thank you very much for your time, and over to you.
Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. It's really hard to speak after listening to some of those accounts, actually. To listen in particular to Catherine's accounts as a mother, thinking about what that must feel like to live with some of the scenes that she described is incredibly painful. And so it feels really difficult to speak after listening to that. But I think it's really important that we kind of sit with that pain and attend to it, that we grieve and that we mourn. But you talked about remembrance and resolve, and so I hope that I can talk both to what has happened, but also what I think has to happen going forward as well. So I guess the first place to start is where you were speaking, which is that genocide is not an event. It wasn't one day. Srebrenica wasn't the one massacre. Genocide is a process, and the process that we witnessed in Bosnia was a long, drawn-out process. It was open to the world to see what was happening, and we let it happen on our watch. The hatred that is required for that was manufactured over not just kind of hundreds of years, but also intensified in that period just before the massacre. And I think that we all know what happens when you demonize and dehumanize and degrade a people and deny them their humanity. And we see that in Gaza, where we've had in early October 2023, people talk about Palestinians as human animals, and talking about monsters in Gaza, where we're talking about human beings who were slaughtered by the Israeli government. And that kind of language is what we see so often circulating around these events. That language, hate speech, words, the demonization of human beings, the denial of their humanity is part of the process by which we arrive at some of these most horrific and disgraceful events. And so, again, as Dr. Wajid said, we are growing up our children are witnessing yet another genocide unfold in ways that I could not have fathomed even a few years ago. My children are 14 and 16, and they have access to social media. They see on their screens every single day how Muslims are talked about, how they are treated, and the double standards with which we are treated both internationally and domestically. I think the hatred that we sow and that we manufacture is also one that infects our international and domestic political institutions. So we know that what happened in Srebrenica
We'll just pause for 2 minutes whilst the call to the prayer is made, and then we'll carry on.
Allahu Akbar, أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح
So the report that we published last year in November 2024 linked what was happening in Gaza to the Islamophobia that the Muslim community here in the UK is increasingly facing. You cannot divorce what is happening on our screens and globally from how Muslims are treated here in the UK. And in that report, we talked about spaces that range from the kind of mental health care that Muslims receive, where we are surveyed through those processes, through higher education, where students who wanted to protest have been shut down, to the right to protest that we have used as a legitimate political right in this country, and us being demonized and villainized along with all the other people who've been out on those protests. Islamophobia here in the UK cannot be divorced from what is happening in Gaza. And we know that in terms of individual hate crimes, Muslims make up 6.5% of the UK population, and yet 38% of hate crimes that were committed last year were against Muslims. We know that Muslim women are more likely to experience those hate crimes, but actually more recently there's been a change in that trajectory. Muslim men are more likely to face that. Guess what that timed with? The Asian grooming gang scandal. So we have this active demonization, which is both through political and mainstream media narratives. And we've had the report that's come out recently around the BBC coverage of Gaza, where an Israeli death is 33 times more likely than to be covered than a Palestinian. And so we know that there are media and political discourses that we need to interrupt, we need to disrupt, we need to challenge, because these things are all linked. And the resolve part that you spoke of, I found it really difficult recently to talk about how do we mobilize, how do we respond to some of these challenges that we face, how do we speak to our children and give them hope, because that is our responsibility. We cannot sit in a place of grief and despair and gloom. It is our responsibility to give hope and to show our children what it is to move forward from this space. And so one of the things that I have latched onto is Zoran Mamdani and what happened in New York City, a 33-year-old South Asian Muslim migrant who won that election against all the odds. He wasn't silent on Palestine. He didn't hide his Muslim identity. He spoke on those issues. He didn't cede the ground. He spoke to it calmly, coolly, and he spoke rationally on these issues. And he was able to speak to and engage communities well beyond just the Muslim community. He was able to speak to all New Yorkers. New York is famously proud of its big Jewish population. He won those communities over in his vote. He was able to speak beyond the confines of private grief and private interest, and was able to mobilize people on shared ground. And I think that that's our challenge, is how do we not sit in a place of private grief on these issues? How do we mobilize each other and our communities to see that actually we have a responsibility to create a more hopeful environment for our children as well?
Thank you very much, Shabna, for this very important point and contextualizing the issue for us here. I would direct everyone to read the Islamophobia report that Runnymede Trust has published. It's a very, very important report, and thank you very much for the work that you've done with that report for the British community. We will be breaking for 7 o'clock when the prayer will start, but before that, we have a message from the Bosnian ambassador who was due to be here today, but unfortunately he hasn't been able to due to a last-minute commitment, so he gives his sincere apologies. And we will be playing that video on our social as part of this live streaming at the end of this program, and that will be available for all of you to listen. But the final speech today will be from our ELM trustee, Dr. Abdullah Falik, who has been instrumental with this event, not just this event, but over the years, bringing the Srebrenica genocide to the British Muslim community in particular, and every year taking a leading role in bringing this agenda to the fore. So without any further delay, Dr. Abdullah.
Thank you so much, Junaid, the Chair, and thank you to the panel of experts and our guests who have arrived today to share your insights. I've only got 2 minutes, so I'm not sure what to cover, but what I'll do is quickly focus on some takeaways for us. We've heard from our experts and our scholars about this tragedy, the genocide, what happened, some irrefutable facts which people can't deny. But where do we go from here? I just want to highlight a couple of things. One is we need to focus on the aspect of religion. The Srebrenica genocide happened because the Bosnian Muslims were Muslims, because they believed in Islam. This was a key part. So when we focus on the genocide, let us not water it down. Let us not be forced by political correctness to say it was a crime, it was a tragedy, it was a genocide. Genocide is genocide. It's very difficult to place genocide category on something because it requires certain criteria. And Srebrenica genocide, as the scholar said before, was clear-cut textbook genocide in Srebrenica. We have now some people or some organizations, they'll talk about the genocide in Srebrenica and say, oh, it was an awful tragedy. It was a bad time in history. It's not. It was a genocide. Unless we focus on that aspect, young people here, kids here who've been to Bosnia, in the future they can't relate to it. They need to know that people were killed, were massacred, were butchered because of their Islam, their religion. That's important. And if you need evidence, let me just cite you one example. And yesterday at the Tower Hamlets Town Hall, where the mayor hosted an event, I was speaking, I gave some examples of actual evidence where the Serbs, the Chetniks, they actually targeted Muslims and Islam. One example in 1991, Radovan Karadzic, he was the Serb national leader. He addressed the Bosnian parliament and he said to everyone, do not think that you will not take Bosnia Herzegovina to hell and that the Muslim people to extinction. Clear-cut evidence, clear-cut vision of his, and this is exactly what happened later on. Another example, in a town called Bratunac, a famous imam called Mustafa Mushkanovic was tortured along with others in a soccer stadium, football stadium. While they were torturing him, they just didn't torture him. They forced him to drink beer. They forced him to put a cross on his chest. He refused. They forced other Muslims there to basically sing Serb songs that praises the crucifix and the such. Because they refused, they were tortured. The other idea for why they did that is because they wanted to convert them to Christianity, so the Bosnian history is no longer in Bosnia. So this was part of the genocide strategy. And as Shabna has mentioned, this was part of a process. If you can see on the screen, this hopefully you can show it on the screen. This is the 10 signs or 10 stages of genocide. They start off with saying basically you are this, you are that, you are animal, you are foreign. Then they start persecution. And at the end, which is the point I'm going to cover now, is denial. They deny what happened in Srebrenica. I have personal experience having been to Bosnia for over 25 years. When I went first time, there was about 700 bodies, shuhada, who had been buried. At the gates of the cemetery, while janazah was taking place, you had Serbs coming to the gates saying, this is fake. This did not take place, just to basically provoke the Muslims. But they were not provoked. So this is the level of denial that's happening, not just in Srebrenica, but in Gaza and elsewhere. You see the same situation. This dehumanization process, the siege mentality, blocking of aid and everything else, that is happening. So what else can we do? So apart from talking about this genocide on the religious ground, we need to also see what we can do as individuals and as organizations. There needs to be education in our schools. I said yesterday, Muslim schools, why are they not talking about the genocide? Let me end here, inshallah, because time's up. But we can maybe continue discussion in another time, inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all our panelists, all our speakers. Thank you to all of you for making the time to join this very important event. Shows that you take this very seriously. And look out for further events, inshallah. And let's not forget this incident and the other atrocities and genocide that is taking place globally, inshallah. Let's be people of justice and speak for the truth at all times. Thank you very much. Jazakumullah khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.